Everyone, as you're joining us on this webinar, entering in from the waiting room, we want to say welcome. And we'll give it a moment or two for everyone else to be able to join us here. Anyone else who will be coming in right at noon, we want them to be able to be with us from the beginning. So let me begin by, first of all, saying we're very glad you're with us for this webinar. We are again resuming our Maryknoll webinars, starting with this webinar today. And I do want to say we all are in for a big treat because Peg is going to present us with an excellent webinar, excellent insights, and challenge us to live closer to caring for God's creation wherever we might be. I'm Deacon Paul Bork. I'm with the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, and I want to thank the team that helped put together this particular webinar. First of all, of course, is Peg Vámosy, Maryknoll Lay Missioner, who will be presenting from El Salvador. So we are very, very grateful to Peg for presenting. And also Karen Bortvet from the Maryknoll Lay Missioners, helping us, and Deacon Kevin McCarthy, my colleague from the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. We also want to say a word of thanks to Meinrad Shearer Emunds of the Maryknoll Lay Missioners, who put together the beginning segment, the reflection that we'll be seeing soon, and it's extremely well done. Peg will be introducing herself, but I do just want to say that Peg Vámosy is a fellow New Yorker by native from upstate New York, who has really lived and devoted her life to God's creation, to the land, from her experience growing up on a farm, caring for the land there, to increasing her knowledge and skills at Cornell University, from there to traveling around the world in many different capacities, the Peace Corps, the Maryknoll Lay Missioners. She'll tell you more about it, but we are very blessed to have her. Just a note about the webinar format today. We would ask that everyone continue to mute themselves during the presentation. There will be time for questions and comments after Peg's presentation, and that will be very good. We can put our questions in the chat or raise our hands, and Karen will help guide us with the questions following Peg's PowerPoint. I would like to note, this is, I think, significant, that Peg's ministry is featured both in the current edition of the Maryknoll magazine and in the Discover Your Neighbor program in the fall newsletter. We'll have links to the Discover Your Neighbor program in our chat box. And by the way, I want to welcome any students that are involved or teachers involved in the Discover Your Neighbor program that are joining us today for this webinar. It's a wonderful program, a wonderful resource for teachers. We'll also have in the chat box ways that you can donate to Peg's ministry, to the Maryknoll Lay Missioners, and to the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. We'll also send everyone a recording of this webinar. Everyone that's registered, we will send you a recording within the next couple of days. Deacon Kevin will be leading an immersion trip to El Salvador in March of this coming year. And on that immersion trip, Peg has graciously invited the group to visit her in her ministry. So there will be more information for that on our Maryknoll website, and we'll send out information about that as well. But that will be a highlight, something coming up. Finally, our next webinar will be October 19th. Father John Barth, one of our Maryknoll missionary priests, currently living along the Thailand-Myanmar border, will be presenting about his ministry with those in that area, particularly the refugees. So enough of myself, and I welcome Peg, and I welcome everyone participating in this webinar.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us. My name is Peg Vámosy. I'm a Maryknoll Lay Missioner here in El Salvador, and I'm happy to be a part of this Maryknoll webinar celebrating the season of creation. As we begin, let's make ourselves mindfully present through an opening prayer. If you're eating lunch or something right now, you might consider stopping for just a couple of minutes for this. I'd ask you to sit comfortably. Close your eyes and be still in this moment. Feel your feet, your legs, your torso, your chest, your arms, neck, right to the top of your head. Take a deep breath and hold it for a few seconds. Then exhale slowly. Take another deep breath and hold it. And exhale. Be aware of your breathing. Together now in the stillness of this moment, with our eyes closed, let's just simply listen to the sounds we will hear.
All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
Amen. Well, as Paul said at the beginning, he gave us a little bit of introduction. Let me just tell you that I grew up on a farm in New York State. I was in 4-H, and my parents were environmentalists before we even knew what that meant. We did roadside trash cleanups as community service projects, and our family planted thousands of trees on our farm to prevent hillside erosion. I studied agriculture. I served in the Peace Corps in Ecuador. I worked on an agricultural college in Honduras. And I went back home to the home farm to be with my parents in their later years. And then I joined the Maryknoll Lay Missioners, and I went first to East Timor and then to Cambodia. And I have now been in El Salvador for 10 years. This special season of creation, which started on September 1st and goes until October 4th, the Feast of St. Francis, has as its theme this year, listen to the voice of creation. In his message for the season, Pope Francis says that that voice has two aspects. First, the sweet song of all creatures, as we just heard. Listening to this song invites us to practice what the Pope calls an ecological spirituality, where we are attentive to God's presence in the natural world. And it should help us realize how we are all connected with all creatures and all other beings in the universe. This interconnectedness is one of the Pope's main points in his encyclical Laudato Si on the care of our common home. But the second part of listening, the Pope says, is to hear the anguished plea of creation, lamenting our mistreatment of this, our common home. He says it's actually a chorus of cries of anguish of the earth, of all the creatures, including the species that are dying out, of the poor who feel more gravely the impact of drought, flooding, hurricanes, heat waves, of the indigenous peoples. And finally, Pope Francis says, the cry of young people anxiously asking adults to do everything possible to prevent or at least limit the collapse of the planet's ecosystems. Let's listen to the voice of one of those young people, Andrea, from right here in the community where I live, Monte San Juan.
Hola, mi nombre es Andrea. Estudio en la Universidad de El Salvador. Hoy les quiero hablar un poco sobre lo que es el medio ambiente. La verdad es muy preocupante para nosotros de jóvenes, porque los adultos, los grandes empresarios, empresas privadas o inclusive nuestros propios padres nos han enseñado mucho a la sobrevivencia, pero no al cuidado de ella, ya que sabemos que esto es parte de nosotros, es parte de lo que nosotros somos, de lo que nosotros queremos ser, porque la naturaleza somos todos, seres vivos somos todos. Entonces, la preocupación de hoy en día es la deforestación. Hay muchas deforestaciones en el mundo, las cuales nosotros no estamos viendo la gravedad de los hechos. Nosotros solo estamos viendo lo que puede llegar a ser comercializar, ya sean casas, ya sean grandes hoteles con ello, pero no estamos viendo que a nuestros jóvenes de hoy en día, los grandes, los adultos, no nos están dejando nada, se lo están llevando todo. Por ello es que en realidad quisiéramos y pedir a las autoridades, a los grandes empresarios que dejen de hacer esas cosas. En los mares hay muchos desechos cuales eso afecta a nuestro mar porque es nuestro. Entonces tenemos que hacer las cosas y pensar en todos, no solo ser individuales. Tenemos que pensar en todos los seres humanos y en los animales porque ellos forman parte de nosotros, la cual hoy les quiero decir que por favor sean conscientes y vean lo que hay alrededor, es una maravilla. Nuestro sol es lo más precioso que puede haber. Ya estoy sacando gotas de nuestro sol, aunque no hay mucho, pero todo es un proceso.
I think if we all take a moment to listen to the voices of young people all around the world, that's the message that they're all saying. Be careful and please help leave something of the earth to us. I think Andrea says very well what the Pope says in his encyclical. Everything is connected. It's all part of one big whole, and we need to look at things as a common group, not just individually. When I first came to El Salvador, Maryknoll Father John Spain gave me some ideas on where I might work in agriculture in a faith-based program. And as I got a few other leads, I was connected to Father Mauricio Saravia, who invited me to his rural parish in Monte San Juan. And I'm going to show some pictures from there. Monte San Juan is about an hour outside of the capital of San Salvador. And Father Mauricio is a Salvadoran diocesan priest. And I listened to his voice first. One of the things that I tried to hear was what he suggested, and that was how I might work more effectively with the people. And he expressed a need to encourage people. He said many of them are conformists. They don't expect that their lot in life can change, can improve any. I was born poor, I'll die poor. And so he encouraged me to try and help open the minds of people and help them see that there are alternatives in the way that things can be done. We don't have to do it the same way we've always done before. He encouraged me particularly to help to find the people, help open their minds to new alternatives. And being a horticulturist, I work in agriculture, and my concern was, of course, for food production. I'm going to stop my video so that maybe the transmission of the pictures will go a little better. Here in El Salvador, corn is the basic crop because that's what people eat. Corn is the sustenance of life, and people in this area try to grow enough corn and beans to have for the entire year for their own food security. They eat corn tortillas 2 or 3 times a day, and corn and beans do make up the main bulk of the diet. So one of the concerns was to try and diversify that, not only to diversify crop production, but also to give them a greater variety of foods to eat in their diet. In the parish, we started with a group of who were interested in trying something new. And we started with home gardens, vegetable gardens that would produce some different kinds of foods for the people. We did some community garden projects together, and we encouraged people to do gardens at their own homes. And they learned a lot about growing tomatoes and peppers and onions and things. And we encouraged them to try things that were not necessarily crops that we'd find in the market. This is Francisca, and she's growing small bunching onions, which do really well here in our hot climate. We're not going to ever grow those nice, normal, big onions, but hey, people should be able to eat what they grow themselves. And she's very happy to grow those, and they taste just as good in your soup. A couple of other kinds of crops that we've tried to encourage people to grow different things: sesame here on the right, and peanuts. things that people eat here normally, but they had never grown those before. We also encourage small animal production, chickens. A lot of people have chickens here, but they often run all over the place. So we tried to help people see how they could keep them corralled. That helps protect them from wild animals, and also from to maintain a better diet for the birds, so they get better egg production. And pigs, people like to like the little pigs. They think it's a lot of fun, but it's also a good source of protein, and pigs are not really demanding on what they eat. So it's an economical way to increase the protein in the diet. Tilapia fish farming. We've encouraged a number of people to put fish ponds in their backyards, and they've been able to grow fish quite easily. And that's a great way. They enjoy the fish in their own meals, and they can also sell some fish, which gives them a little extra income as well. In addition to working on food security and trying to promote organic production, sustainable agricultural production, we listen to the voice of the soil. One of the practices, unfortunately too common here, is burning the crop residues at the end of the season before planting the next time. And of course, this damages the living creatures in the top layer of the soil, both little critters that walk around and run around and hide there, as well as the microorganisms, which are so vital to the balance of everything working in the soil. In addition, all that crop residue, that organic matter, is then lost, and that can certainly serve as fertilizer for the next crop. So in growing corn and even other crops, we've encouraged people to leave that organic matter on the top of the soil. It helps serve as a mulch, keeps the soil moist, breaks the impact of raindrops so we don't get so much erosion, and it breaks down and serves as fertilizer for the crops. Another aspect of listening to the voice of the soil, most people here plant on steep hillsides, and erosion is a serious problem. Much of the topsoil has washed away. So we've been promoting making contour ditches to help conserve that. So how do you make a straight contour line? Well, it's not rocket science. With 2 or 3 sticks, we tie together with exact measurements and make an A-frame and put a weight on it from the top, and you can easily mark out a level line across the field. And then once it's staked, we dig the ditch. But when it rains, then the rain collects in that ditch, and then it soaks in slowly into the earth, eventually getting down into the aquifer, which is so critical. And it also prevents all that topsoil from washing all the way down the hillside. The organic matter is not just in the fields. There's lots of trees here in the tropics which lose their leaves, and that accumulates in people's yards and in the roads. And it doesn't need to be wasted. So we try to encourage people to save it, pick it up and put it together with some chicken manure, cow manure, whatever they can find to make compost. And compost, of course, is what we all need in our yards. It makes great fertilizer. And our agricultural groups field that we have a community field where it's entirely organic, and we grow corn with absolutely no chemical fertilizer whatsoever. We've had the field now for 4 or 5 years, and every year it gets better by leaving more and more organic matter and adding in that compost. One of the other cries of anguish of the soil is all the trash that accumulates. And in a place where people don't have adequate garbage disposal systems, sometimes they have nowhere else to get rid of trash, and it just is thrown all over the place. In addition to the agricultural ministry group in our parish, we also have an environmental ministry group. And one of the first projects that we undertook was building recycling collection bins. And here we are painting it with spent motor oil so that this bin can just sit outside in the rain all year round and collect bottles and cans that can be recycled. There are people here who will recycle these and reuse them in factories here. And so we've encouraged people to recycle at least the plastic bottles and aluminum cans that beverages are sold in. And it makes quite a difference, actually. So now we have one of these bins in each one of the dozen village chapels and the 2 main churches of our parish. Some of the containers and plastic things that end up on the ground are not beverage containers, but pesticide containers. People use a lot of pesticides in their fields and they have no place to throw them, so they just drop them. And when the rain comes, they often wash down into the river, which you can imagine what that does to the river. So our environmental group has coordinated the effort to get farmers to collect up those spent pesticide containers and in collaboration with the town government, take them away to proper disposal facilities. Of course, we would like to get people to not use so many pesticides, but you have to find a way to control the pests, especially here in the tropics. They're very hungry. They eat a lot of our crops. So we've tried with a few different things, making natural remedies here. This one uses onions and garlic and hot chili peppers and some herbs. Sometimes they work, not always, but we're trying to perfect that as we learn together in this process. The voice of the plants and animals and all the creatures that are around us is also so very important. One of the problems that pesticide use brings is that it kills insects, and many of those insects are beneficial insects, those that pollinate our crops. We live without bees and other pollinators, and so we try to listen to that voice as well, and the incredible biodiversity which is threatened now. This is a flock of birds. We call them asajuanes here. It's migratory birds. They come in flocks of thousands of birds, and they pass over 2 times a year as they move from north to south and south to north. And there are many different species. It's not just one kind of bird, but similar to what the Canadian geese do in the northern parts of the United States. But people here have noticed that over the last few years, there are fewer and fewer of these birds. And all the bird species that here in El Salvador seem to be threatened. This is the torogos, El Salvador's national bird, a beautiful little bird with a double tail. And the poor thing has to live right in the cities now because we've invaded its habitat so much. Many of the wild animals that have been part of El Salvador's habitat for years are disappearing. The older people here lament that they haven't seen any of this animal or that animal in so long. This is a cotusa. It's a rodent, and it's actually quite big. They're like a small dog. They're not little things like mice. They're big. But again, they have to learn how to share the environment with the people. This one is in my yard, finding what he can find to eat at my compost pile. And then not only the animals, but also the plants. There are so many plants which are disappearing. People talk about the varieties of trees that used to be here that no longer are. This is the fruit and the seed of a tree called the ojuste tree, which is a big, nice shade tree, and it's an excellent tree to have along the rivers because it helps, the deep roots help promote the water going down into the soil and recharging the aquifers. And the seed is edible. It's quite tasty. Even in this immature state, you can boil it up and eat it. Or as it's dried, then it can be ground into flour. And people say that back when they were suffering from famine, they would use this to make tortillas when they didn't have corn. So it's quite a valuable species to keep around. And part of our work is trying to help people preserve and protect and appreciate these species that traditionally were important, but tend to get lost in the wayside. The last area of the many voices that we try to listen to here is the voice of the river. This is the river San Juan. In Monte San Juan, we have three main rivers, and we're fortunate that we're so blessed. And this is Mila, who lives near this, the lower part of this river. Our watershed ends when this river joins into the others and forms another river on downstream. But unfortunately, it's not always looking quite so pretty as that. Many times we see a huge accumulations of trash, bottles, cans, garbage, tires, shoes, anything that gets dropped on the ground eventually walks into the river. The river is used for irrigation. Up and down the length of the river, there are many farmers who grow fruit and vegetable crops, and with a small dam in the river, they might dam up the river with some stones or with sandbags and to pool up the water, and then they drop a hose in there and they pump the water out to water their crops. Unfortunately, there are so many people irrigating that the river goes dry. There are times of the year when pieces of the river have no water whatsoever. And there are times of the day when a normal flowing river, the flow goes so low that people can't even irrigate. So the decreased flow, the increased pollution have been concerns of our, as I said, people use pesticides to keep their crops what they think is healthy, to keep down the pests anyway. And they typically use a backpack sprayer, which is filled with water from the river, and they mixed up their pesticides right there. Sometimes there are accidents, sometimes the pesticide falls in the river, and I have no doubt that more than one farmer has washed their backpack sprayer in the river. So you can imagine what kind of toxic elements that leaves in the water. So all of these concerns were on our list of the environmental ministry group. And then we had a really big wake-up call when we saw this sign go up at the end of on the edge of the road, right at the headwaters of the river. Land for sale. It's about 100 acres in this piece of land. And it was about 4 years ago now. And we said, oh dear, what will happen if there is uncontrolled, unplanned development of this parcel of land? So we met and asked the mayor if he could buy the land for the town and keep it as a protected area. And he laughed, of course, because it's way too expensive. The town didn't have any kind of money to do that. So then we decided we would go broader and wider to ask for help. This is Domingo Chavez, a member of our environmental committee at the parish, holding a copy of the Pope's encyclical, Laudato Si. And this is Reynaldo Quesada, another member of the committee, holding a copy of El Salvador's environmental laws. Both of those documents we've spent plenty of time studying. So we, based on with our tools in hand and based on our knowledge from them, we drafted a letter that would go not only to our mayor, but to the heads of the town councils in the other 3 towns through which that river flows. And we sent it also to the National Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. And it was signed, of course, by our pastor, because it was a letter from the parish. And this is Father Mauricio Saravia, who supported our efforts all along the way. And we finally got someone from the National Ministry of the Environment to come and look at the situation and discuss the problem with us. And her recommendation was that we, rather than try to buy land or for any other exorbitant thing, try to develop a management plan for the entire watershed. And so that's what we've been working on. We got people together from the 4 towns to discuss the problems, what needed to be done, what were the real concerns. Then we went to the 4 town councils with the mayor and all their councilmen at the meetings and presented the idea, and all were in favor of going ahead with the project. Then it was a matter of getting out and looking at the river from the headwaters to the end, checking, taking data, looking at stream flow, looking at the vegetation, the erosion problems, the deforestation problems, all kinds of things. We met with small groups in each community, leaders and farmers and people who live there, looking at maps to identify where the problem areas were. Deforestation is a big problem. Indiscriminate cutting down of trees, especially right along the river. when the trees are are cut, that's a really big problem, because right on the river's edge is where we need to protect the soil the most. And so last year we developed the plan, management plan for the watershed for the river San Juan. And now it's a matter of implementing that plan and making it a living document. Of course, it'll continue to be modified as time goes on, but our environment ministry has gone to the villages to meet with leaders in different communities. We still have a lot more to do, but to let them know what it's about, help them feel that their voice is heard, that they are part of deciding what needs to be done with the river. They're especially interested in going to the river and looking at the problems firsthand and examining the causes of what's happening. We sit down in little focus groups and go through problem analysis, try and figure out what the problems are, what the causes are, what could be some possible solutions. And this is Sol Munoz, technician from the Ministry of the Environment, who has come and been very involved with the whole project. And she's been teaching people how to monitor the quality and the flow in the river. And it's been really interesting that people have found it very fascinating to scoop up the aquatic wildlife, the invertebrates that are living in the water, and count them meticulously one by one to see how many different species there are. You can imagine if they dump pesticides in the river, there's not going to be too many things living there after that. So the idea is to do sort of citizen science, where the people learn how to monitor the river, what's going on there, and continue to do it periodically. And it's their river. They are the ones who will become responsible for it and see that it carries on into the future. And I think we can end this with listening to one more voice from here in El Salvador in Monte San Juan, Reynaldo Sada. So let's listen to what he has to say about this.
Nosotros acá tratando de reflexionar y accionar sobre las dificultades que estamos teniendo con los recursos naturales, específicamente con el agua y el río San Juan. La preocupación es que la gente actúa sin conciencia, no tiene conciencia de lo bueno o lo malo que esté haciendo. Y lo preocupante es que nosotros hemos disfrutado de este recurso, pero las futuras generaciones, ¿qué van a tener? Entonces estamos centrados en esa labor, en tratar de conservar esa microcuenca que corresponde al río San Juan. Hemos estado empeñados en concientizar a las personas, la labor que hemos hecho como pastoral, para despertar ese poquito de conciencia en la conservación del recurso agua. Nosotros que ya disfrutamos de este recurso, está comprometido el futuro para las nuevas generaciones. Así es que esperamos que toda esta acción sirva y contribuya para eso.
Well, you've all been doing a lot of listening. Maybe now you'd like to add your voice to the chorus. So if people have questions or comments, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat box at the bottom. There's a little thing chat. You can type a question in there if you'd rather. I think Karen's going to try and help us select the questions out, or if people have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Unmute yourself and jump in.
Thanks, Peg. There's one question that has already come in the chat. When you're mentioning the new crops that were introduced and doing the animal husbandry in a different way, someone asked, were the new crops and animals that you tried, quote unquote, successful?
Some are and some aren't. Some of the people who started pig raising, for example, have given up on it. They've decided that that's a lot of work. And others have said, no, I want to try it now. I want to get a new little pig and raise it because I know that if you can make money by selling the meat of the pig. They don't really make much money by selling live piglets, but if they can fatten those pigs up and sell the meat, that's they found that to be much more economical. It's a lot of work, and people that aren't used to feeding pigs 2 or 3 times a day to have to take that job on, it's a change. Some of the other crops, we have encouraged people to grow some things that are sort of like traditional crops. Spinach and Swiss chard and those kind of things don't do really well here in our hot climate. So more native species like tree spinach, things that are adapted to the hot weather, they do really well. And people do indeed grow those now. And like the onions that Francisca had in the picture, we're not growing big fat onions like people like to buy in the market. But if you can grow little bunching onions in your garden and flavor your foods with those, why not? So some have been successful, some are not always.
Great, you've got a bunch more questions coming in, Peg. Someone is asking around, they say, what a beautiful example of communal caring for creation on so many levels. Amazing. Citizen science is powerful. One question, are you also working to plant native trees?
Yes, we are. A few years ago, we started asking at Mass, people, would you please bring the seeds of trees that are in your neighborhood, things that seem to be disappearing. And we gave them a whole long list of things. And we collected some of those seeds, and we had a nursery and grew those trees out. And the youth took care of them for a while. And then we gave the trees away at the parish and did several reforestation projects. There are a number of reforestation projects that happen regularly through different institutions here in the country, and they're usually making trees available to us. People really like to get the fruit trees. Oh, I want that improved mango variety. Oh, then I want some guava tree. Oh, I want the tangerines and things that are that they can eat. And why not? Fruit trees are just as effective at producing oxygen as non-edible producing trees. So we combined trying to promote native species and growing things that are a little more interesting for people too.
Wonderful. I have 2 questions that came in around the water project, so I'm going to put those together for you. One was just what happened? Was the land sold? And is the idea that folks will follow the guidelines caring for the environment? And then along those same lines, has rainfall decreased over the past years because of climate change? And is there enough water for farmers to still get what they need from the river?
Okay, first about the land, it has been sold, at least parts of it. I'm not sure if the entire parcel has been cut up, and people got right in there with bulldozers and started raising havoc. And after the fact, of course, then some people complained, and there are now, I think, 7 or 8 lawsuits pending over the use of that land. Stop work orders have been placed on people in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 of those operations. Somebody built a car auto body repair shop right on the edge of the road. You can imagine what runs off from that into the soil. So yeah, here it's more common that people lament the fact afterwards and say, oh, gee, we shouldn't have done that, or we shouldn't have allowed that. And part of what we're trying to do with the watershed management program is, as Reynaldo said, raise people's consciousness so that they understand that these things need to be dealt with beforehand, not just slap a fine on afterwards when the problem has already occurred. We haven't prevented all the damage that could have been done in that particular parcel. We hope that we're slowing it down and that maybe there won't be real serious problems that result from whatever else happens. I mean, development's going to happen. People need to have more housing. People need to have facilities. But if it's done in a controlled way so that the river can still survive and the environment is not totally destroyed, that's what we hope. And in terms of climate change, I have a thermometer when I try to keep track of the temperature every day. And every year that I've been here, it has gotten hotter. Up until this year, the rains started a little earlier, and so it didn't get quite as hot. Usually our hottest time is March, April, and the very first part of May before the rains start. And this year the rains started at the end of March, so we didn't have that whole month of April that heated up so much. The actual amount of rain varies more, I would say, from year to year than it has over the long term. I don't have good records of what's typical rainfall over the past 50 years, but this year has been a really good rainy season. The people are happy. We've got more rain than we did the last couple of years, but the whole central section of El Salvador is considered to be in a dry trough in the middle of Central America, which is susceptible to drought. And fortunately, this year we're not feeling it quite so much, but there are other areas of the country which do suffer from it. And at the same time, there are areas that have been flooded this year with a lot excess rain. So I can't say that we've diminished our quantity of rainfall that much. I don't really know. I think the amount of water that falls from the sky, it should be sufficient to grow all the crops we need here if we know how to manage it. And that means we need to find better ways of conserving some of that water that falls in the rainy season so we can use it in the dry season as well.
Thanks, Peg, for all the details there. There's a couple of questions that have come in that are sort of around human concerns. One is if you could speak a little bit about the safety since the events in the 1980s. And then also just wondering if there has been any resistance from larger growers or from the government or even from the cartels to the work you're doing there in El Salvador and that your ministry does.
Well, the situation in the 80s was that El Salvador was in the Civil War. And fortunately that ended. It was way too long. The peace accords were signed in 1992. And the revolutionary group became a political party. And so in theory, that was quite a change and an end to outright warring going on. Over the next 20, 30 years, we have had a real increase in gang presence and basically gang warfare. There have been 2 or 3 different gangs which have caused serious problems in this country. And about 2015, we were one of the countries with the highest homicide rates in the world. It hasn't gotten better. It's gone up and down, and some governments try certain tactics. Right now, our government has put a state of exception in place. It's not quite a state of emergency, but a state of exception, trying to, they limit personal freedoms to try and combat the gang presence. It was supposedly for 30 days, but it's been extended. We started at the beginning of April and it's still in place. There's no real hope that will end anytime soon. On the surface, it appears that gang presence has decreased. There are many communities in this country where people are afraid to go from one side of the city to another because of gang presence. And right now they say that has improved. That because of the state of exception, they are able to move about more freely. Over 40,000 people have been incarcerated since the beginning of April. It's hard to see where the justice system can handle processing all those cases, because certainly there are people who've been totally who are totally innocent who've been swept up in that as well. Many of those people who are incarcerated have left families without any bread earners. So we have a lot of families who are suffering from this situation at the present time. It's difficult, but we go ahead as we can. And our work here in our community is pretty remote. The cartels and the big businesses they're not looking at Monte San Juan, and no, we haven't had any opposition to that. I would say that there probably is corruption at every single level. And I would guess that some of the reason that some of the development that's gone on at the headwaters where that land was sold, there probably are some laws in place that require environmental impact statements. And I'm sure that they were overlooked for one reason or another, allowing people to go ahead and do those things. So those are the kinds of things that we have to deal with here. And the more people who are aware of how things work and how things can be corrupted, then the better off they are. And we're hoping that not only do we save this river, but that we empower the people in this community to take charge of their lives and make decisions for their own future about the environment and many other things as well.
Peg, I feel like it's very obvious as you share that a big piece of your heart is there in El Salvador. And a question that came up in your introduction, you've been in many different places, worked with many different people. Are there lessons that you've learned from the Salvadoran people that were new to you and you're working with this ministry?
I think I learned from all the people I work with. I've often thought that I bring very little. I gain so much more. I don't teach the people how to grow vegetables. I don't teach them how to make compost. We learn together. There's so many different ways of doing things. And I think there are a lot of people who, like Father Mauricio said, are kind of like, well, you know what, we're not going to change this. But there are others who are quite interested in trying something new. And they are very capable of teaching their peers and their other community members much better than I am. So the day I leave, I don't worry that this will all fall apart because the seeds are planted. These people will continue to discover new ways of doing things and to share that information with each other. And it's really fun when I sometimes hear someone saying something that I said a couple of years ago, and I think, yeah, they got it. Now they're the ones who are making the voice heard.
As you're mentioning all the different folks involved, I know we heard from, I think it was Andrea at the beginning. Are there youth and young adults engaged in the community, or how are they engaged in your efforts?
Well, I had a couple of other videos, but we didn't have time to get all the subtitles on. So you could have spent the whole morning or afternoon or evening, whatever time it is where you are, listening to many people speak. We do have quite a few people involved, and we try to get more all the time. We never have enough. If we would be in all of the villages doing spreading the word about this management plan, if we had a few more people, but we try and get as many involved as we can, and we like to get the youth involved. They're very passionate about it, but they also have college work and high school class homework to do, so they're not always quite as available as some other people.
There have been a number of questions just about how you got that level of involvement. Someone says we have some of the same issues here in our country. So how do you get folks engaged in this? What's your secret to such a high level of participation?
I think it's tapping people on the shoulder, is saying, I need you. I realize that you understand the situation, and I know that in your heart you care about this. So we need you. We need you to do this. And Domingo Chavez, for example, who was in a couple of the pictures, his wife's been very active in the parish for many years, and he was kind of on the sidelines. But I knew that he was he's a farmer, and he understands the situation. So I said to his wife one day, ask your husband to come to this meeting and tell him we need him there. And he repeats that story over and over when people say, how'd you get involved? He says, well, Peg told my wife I needed to go to the meeting, so here I am. And he's been very committed since then. And I think that personal invitation goes a long ways. We've stood at Mass and said, hey, you know what? There's going to be a meeting about the environment on Thursday night. Guess what? Nobody comes. But if you take that personal invitation and ask people and focus in on what their gifts are, you've seen somebody who's eloquent, or who's a good writer, or who's committed to youth or to education or to the environment, tap on that and say, hey, we need you.
great. That makes such a difference, that personal invitation. I'm going to read this one word for word question that came in, Peg, because I want to make sure I get this one right. Someone asked, they said, I have heard that noise pollution by factories or even communities have caused changes in both marine life and animals, causing them to migrate out of their typical environments. Have you experienced something similar or similar issue in your community?
I experience noise pollution all the time. They love to have dances here with those mobile discotheques. They bring speakers that are taller than people and they set them up and it blasts out and my tin roof vibrates. I say there's lots of noise pollution. Whether it causes us to migrate or not, I don't know. It probably causes us to lose our hearing.
It hasn't caused Peg to migrate yet?
Not yet.
Someone else also asked about the currency. What's happening with currency in your village? Do people understand or use Bitcoin?
Well, I think it was almost a year ago that the government decided that they would make Bitcoin, one of those virtual currencies, one of the legal tenders here in El Salvador. Our normal currency is the US dollar. And so people were worried at first that they were going to have to figure out something new. And most people didn't. The government tried to encourage people to use it. And so they gave you $30 if you got the app on your phone and signed up and you could get $30 in Bitcoin, which many people did. And they took it right out of Bitcoin and went and spent the $30 at the market. Beyond that, I think most people have never used it. Here in this community of Monte San Juan, there are about 12,000 people. I know one fellow who uses it. I don't know anybody else. I mean, I've heard of a number of people who got their $30 out of it, but I don't know anybody else that uses it. So they don't really care that it's bottomed out and it's not worth anything anymore, or they're hoping that it's going up. I think most people here are pretty much oblivious to it. They are concerned that the government has invested quite a bit of money in it. And so in general terms, I think we all hope that it goes back up again so that the government's investment pays off. But in terms of affecting people's individual lives, no, we still use dollar coins and quarters.
Thank you so much, Peg. You've shared so much information with us and so many great stories. And there's definitely a lot of struggle that it seems your community is facing there. I'm wondering if you can just wrap us up with what is bringing you hope right now from your ministry, from where you are.
I think the most hopeful thing are the people. People like Andrea and Reynaldo and all the others who were involved in the ministries. Today, I'm not at the community agricultural field because I'm here with you, but tomorrow there's another event going on. So we switched our normal work day from yesterday to today. And the people said, yeah, we have to go. We can't just leave that field. We'll go. We'll go another day. We'll go on Tuesday and plant the beans and weed the corn and get ready to plant some other things. So they're enthused. They're excited about it. They were so happy to harvest their first corn and have elotes, corn on the cob, and they grind it up and make 3 or 4 other delicious treats out of it. And they do it right in the field. They bring a pot and we get some old wood that's dried up and make a fire and cook it right there. And their enthusiasm is just infectious. They are excited. They have children who they hope will be able to enjoy a healthy planet in the future. And they're all encouraged that, we can only make things better. We can't allow things to get worse here. And that's what gives me hope, the people here themselves.
So Peg is even better in person than she is on Zoom. So I put in the chat there, anybody, we have a little trip to El Salvador in March. And if we hope to visit her in our community, if you want to find out more information about that at maryknoll.us.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Peg. I just want to mention, Richard, did I see your hand up there? Yes. If you could unmute yourself, maybe we have time for one more question, Richard.
Sure, yeah. I just want to say hi to Peg. Peg and I know each other personally. And we were in the same orientation class of 2008 with the Maryknoll Lay Missioners. And Peg, thank you for sharing your ministry with us. And I want to give you all my blessings to your ministry and for the people there. As I know, one person here from El Salvador, who's also, I'm helping her husband to be a person of integrity. So thank you for sharing your ministry with us.
Thank you, Richard. Great to see you.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you who participated in this webinar today. It's wonderful to see your faces on there.
Thanks, Peg. Santa, did you have one final question or comment?
No, I was clapping. That was my reaction. That was the clapping reaction.
That's
She's
even
one of
better.
those planted fans in there. Thanks, Santa.
Good to see you, Peg.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and especially thank you, Peg. This was wonderful. I think just the beginning even of our webinar, that reflection was just wonderful. So thank you. We will send everyone a follow-up email within the next couple of days with a recording of this webinar. We'll also have links to pertinent information and follow-ups. And we will have another webinar coming up next month on October 18th. We'll send out an invitation for that as well. But truly, God is working through you, Peg, and El Salvador and all those whom you are with. And we thank you very much. We have reached the top of the hour, so I think that we can say goodbye. And Peg, maybe if you have a final word or so, you could even offer us perhaps a very short final closing prayer.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you. And let's thank God especially for this time together, for the opportunity to share, for the opportunity to see each other's faces, to hear voices, and help us to listen to the voice of creation all around us, wherever we are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a blessed day and a good day.
Thank you.